As you've been hearing all today, we, for the first time in human history, are dramatically altering how our planet functions. And as you've also gathered, we're putting ourselves and many other species at dire risk, mortal risk. We've come up against environmental limits and we've exceeded them. We've sailed straight through them. Now, this raises and makes us live some very big questions. Will we change in time? Will we generate our own type of Big Bang? Will we survive? I believe that not only will we survive, but that we can thrive. And my talk is to say how. I want to first introduce you to the impossible hamster.
From birth to puberty, a hamster doubles its weight each week. If it didn't stop when mature, as animals do, and continue to double, on its first birthday, we would be staring at a 9 billion ton hamster. This hamster could eat all of the corn produced annually worldwide in a single day and still be hungry. There is a reason why, in nature, things grow in size only to a certain point. So why do most economists and politicians think that the economy can grow forever and ever and ever?
The very simple moral of that tale is we cannot keep on using non-renewable resources to expand our economy forever. As economist Kenneth Boulding said, anybody who thinks that we can have infinite growth in a finite world is either a fool or an economist. And of course, it's possible to be both. This is a chart of what's called the world footprint. Now, in 2013, every year we're using 1.5 planets worth of resources. And of course, we only got one. We're on task to go to 3 planets worth of resources by 2050, even on modest assumptions. But what's most startling about this is that back in 1980, we were actually living at 1 planet's level of resources. So that for the whole of human history, we've survived within the planet's limits. We've already exceeded them by 50% in the last 35 years. And we're on target in the next 40 years to exceed them by 200%. That is unprecedented change. The story goes on. We've talked a lot about global warming, but just look at what is happening now. It's not something in the future, it's here with us. That was the Arctic sea ice in the summer of 1980. That was the Arctic sea ice last year. The area has gone down by half, the volume has gone down by 3/4. Again, just in 30 years. The pace of change is unprecedented, and it doesn't stop there. We're putting many of our ecosystem services, our ecosystems that we depend on, our life support systems, at huge risk. The Millennium Ecosystem Assessment said that, in 2005, said that 15 out of the 25 major life support systems were either in decline or severe decline. That includes things like topsoil. It includes pollination systems. It includes fresh water. It includes fish. And we've been hearing more about what's happening to our seas. It's not just climate change. We're overusing our life support systems. And we are going to pay dearly for that, but so are many other species. Yes, there have been 5 mass extinctions before, but they weren't caused by any species, firstly. Secondly, they took place, those mass extinctions, over a very short geological time, but actually the minimum was 200,000 years, and the maximum was about 2 million years. What we're talking about is in our lifetimes, less than 100 years. This is unprecedented, and it is the biggest issue we face, and we've ever faced as humankind. Are we facing our Big Bang? Of course, it wouldn't be like that. It won't be anything like as quick, as dramatic, or even as beautiful. But it would be very horrible, not just for us, but for many other species. Against all the odds, I don't think so. And why? Well, part of it comes down to the fact that I don't think there are limits to human creativity, but much more, in my mind, comes down to the power of the human spirit at our best. Does that mean that I believe technology will solve it? Technology is crucial, but I think they will be necessary but not nearly sufficient. And why? There's many reasons I haven't got time to go into, but part of the factor is the population growth. A much bigger factor is how much the more fortunate of us are consuming of the planet's resources all the time. And another huge factor is inequality. We have got such massive inequality that when we did a study about 5 years ago, if we want to raise the living standards of everybody who's living on the planet on $1 a day by another $1, the whole world income has to go up by $166 a day. We can't do that ecologically. We haven't got the planet's, the resources to do that. And it is so huge. There's about 400, probably a bit more people in this audience. Do you know that the richest 400 Americans have more wealth than the bottom 155 million? The people in this room, more wealth than 155 million other people. We've gone to crazy levels of inequality. And what that all results in, again, cutting a long story short, is that if we get our foot back on the economic accelerator, we just burn our planet up even faster. But if we put it on the brake, we put more people out of work, we cause more inequality, we cause more poverty. We can't do it in our current economic model. It's not possible, even with all the technological change and all the creativity we want. So we need a new economic model. And we need a great transition to an economy that works very differently, where the goal is maximizing human well-being and social justice within fair ecological limits, within those planetary limits. That is the crucial task that we've got to do. And by well-being, by the way, it's a very simple concept, just to say a little bit about it. People's well-being is dependent on two things: what happens in their own lives and what happens in their economy. In terms of their own lives, it's all about the quality of one's relationships and how much one feels valued by other people and how much one feels one's work and task and all looking after family is valuable. So it comes down to the things we've been talking about all today, about belonging and about connections and love and about giving. Because the most powerful thing individually for our well-being is to give. And economics just doesn't recognize giving as a concept. That's not brought into economics. And that's the most powerful thing for our well-being. So this is a very different economy. I can only touch on very quickly what that looks like. And I can't cover all the elements of it. It's going to require really serious transformation of our banking and finance system. We've got banks at the minute that, well, we need banks that are fair, stable, and socially useful. We've got banks at the minute that are none of those things. We've got a massive transformation there. We have to put a major emphasis on prevention. We have to, well, I won't go through all the other things, but they are, in many areas, they are huge in terms of what we need to do. But I want to just cover 4 quickly. We need a revolution in our values. We need those intrinsic values he talked about being really emphasized. And that means not seeing ourselves as consumers, it means seeing ourselves as stewards. And it means seeing ourselves as economic citizens. There was a survey by the World Economic Forum back in 2009 of 140,000 business people. And that showed that 2/3 thought the financial crash, the meltdown, was not just an economic crisis, but a values crisis. And a similar 2/3 said that they practice very different values, and their organizations practice very different values at work than at home. Why? Why don't we live in our economic systems, our markets, the same values as we live with the people we love? That's what we need to do. And we've taken a different set of values. So that's the first thing we need to do. The second thing is we need to change what we measure. There's an old saying, you treasure what you measure. And what gets measured gets done. GDP, which we rely on at the moment, is just like a speedometer. It tells you whether you're going faster. It can be useful, but if you don't know whether you're going to run out of fuel or overheat, as our planet's doing, it's not very much help. You need those other dials. But most particularly, you need to know if you're going in the right direction. Because going in the wrong direction faster is not very clever. This is something we did a few years ago, and we just renewed last year. On the left-hand side, you've got how long people live and how happy they are, their well-being. So it's a combination of each, and these are the countries in the world. Along the bottom, you've got how many amount of resources each country is using to provide that happy, long lives. And around 2, just below 2, are countries that are living within the planet's limits. And down the bottom in the black, you've got mainly sub-Saharan African countries where, for a whole lot of reasons, injustice, many other things, people are living short and not very happy lives. It's getting better, but it's not getting better fast enough. Up in the top right, you've got countries like the USA and the Gulf states where people are consuming at 5, 8 planets worth of resources each year. They may have quite happy and long lives, but they're consuming far too much. And what's happening is you're getting the idea of economic growth, and what we think is more and more countries trying to move up to the top right. It's the wrong place. It's the wrong direction. And some of them are even managing to go down to the bottom right, even worse. Well-being's going down in the US. Where we need to be is up in that top left-hand corner. The one that's nearest to it, but not quite there, is Costa Rica. It's first in our Happy Planet Index. People there in Costa Rica live longer lives, longer life expectancy in the USA. They have higher well-being. They do so on 1/4 of the GDP and 1/4 of the use of planet's resources. So which is the more efficient economy? Which is the better economy? The answer's obvious. Why? Many reasons. They got nearly 100% electricity from renewables, huge investment in health and education, and of course some Latin zing and bounce. So there's many reasons, but that's where we need to get to, up that top left. The third thing I want to talk about quickly is changing markets. And I mean changing markets, I mean managing markets, because markets are human entities, they're social and political constructs. We created them, we can manage them. This idea that they are self-leveling, rubbish. It was an American ecologist, Amory Lovins, who said markets make a good servant, a poor master, and a worse religion. We got markets as religion. We need to get them back to being our servants. Again, as has been talked about already, we need to get the prices right. It was an American vice president of ExxonMobil, Øystein Dahl, who said, communism collapsed because it didn't allow prices to tell the economic truth. Capitalism will collapse because it doesn't allow prices to tell the ecological truth. And there's some truth in that. But the second thing one needs to do, as well as getting prices right, is deal with the whole issue, and manage markets, is deal with the whole issue of power in markets. I've just talked already about the level of inequality, and that's worldwide. The richest 1% in the world have more wealth than the bottom 57% of people. And then, so you haven't got equal purchasing power, and then you've got some producers, the world grain market controlled by about 5 companies, massive producer power, and very unequal consumer power. And people who go into markets with more power than others end up with even more power. So when Adam Smith talked about how markets function and the invisible hand, he talked about lots of buyers, lots of sellers, none of them the power to alter the market. And particularly, he talked about them being moral actors. We've forgotten that bit, very conveniently. So we've got to change quite a lot of things to make markets work, but we can do it. And lastly, we've got to change the engine of the whole system. Our scarcest resource, as you've heard very clearly, are ecological resources. It's not money. So our businesses should be maximizing returns to ecological resources in terms of well-being and things like that, in terms of job creation. That's a very different system. It requires taxing things like non-renewable resources, waste at a massive level, not taxing labor and value added. It requires only satisficing on returns to financial capital. You could even argue that's not capitalism. It's a market system still, but it's not maximizing returns to financial resources, which is the core definition of capitalism. So we've got to dream very differently. We need job creation as a goal. We need employees as assets and equity holders, joint equity holders with financial capital, not costs. That requires real changes to accounting systems. And we require the value of companies to reflect the true value created or destroyed, not just economically, but environmentally and socially as well. That's not triple bottom line, that's one bottom line. It's a radical change in the engine room. We've got to do that. So those are just whipping through 4 quick areas. Let me nearly sum up on what you can do. We talked about work and living the same values already. So what we do through our work and what values we live is absolutely crucial. But what we do in our lives and our communities is also crucial, about how much little actions can add up and can multiply. Lots of a little equal a lot. What we buy is obviously very important. So that's all about what we demonstrate. But I want to finish on what we demand. Because at the minute, I think the biggest problem for all of us who know things are wrong and want to do something about it is we're playing our different instruments to different scores in different orchestras. We've got to play our own instruments, but we need to play them to a common number of scores in one broad orchestra. And I think that is phenomenally important. And that is why my organization, working with others, is working very hard to create a movement for change. Lots of people coming into this, trying to create a real clarity about what's wrong with the economic system, coming up with breaking a whole series of mythbusters. We just published one, and you can get more details of all this on our website, around strivers and skivers. That's the biggest lethal myth that everyone can see. There's many, many more. I won't start on them. We've trying to set out with others again a vision of what an economy of the common good would look like, what the components are, what the first steps are. And we're trying to work with others to train and involve leaders in all sorts of walks of life, young ones, mentoring programs, a university of new economics, trying to bring people who potentially can lead in their own organizations to take back that knowledge, use it in their own organizations, and work with others to create a broad movement for change. And if you forgive me, I just want to end on one personal story. Because back in 1994, when I was at Oxfam, we were one of the experts in providing water in emergencies. And the Rwanda genocide was happening, and huge numbers of refugees have flowed out to Tanzania, to Uganda. About 750,000 refugees in total. And we'd provided the fresh water for them in really difficult situations. We'd used up all our water engineers, we'd used up all our money. And then I get a call saying 1 million people have crossed into what was then Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And could we come out and assess it? So we took a team out there very rapidly. And those people, that 1 million people, were situated between 2 volcanoes on a lava flow with the nearest round trip to any water supply, even not a good water supply, 50 miles. Cholera set in, and it was like being in the worst film you could imagine, but it was real. People were dying at a rate of 3,000 a day, and you'd be going along, and you'd just see people drop in front of you. It was just unbelievably horrible. The world's press was there. The American army was there. The French army was there. The German army was there. And they said, we'll provide the water, because that's what you needed. You needed fresh water and decent sewerage, those things. But it became clearer and clearer they weren't going to do it. The initial discussions inside Oxfam was this was impossible. But we just realized nobody was going to do this. So we agreed and worked as a team and decided to put Oxfam £5 million into debt. We put a massive appeal out to the British public. We called for water engineers worldwide. Within a week and a half, we raised 25 million quid. We got equipment flown out using those armies, and we provided water to those million people. And the later assessment said that 70,000 lives had been saved as a result of that. Now, why do I tell you this? Because the size of the problem we face makes us all think this is impossible. What I want to tell you, and that's why this was so life-changing for me, is sometimes the impossible is possible if it's the right cause and if enough people can come together, because that required people in all sorts of ways to work together. So what I want to leave you with is that basically the time is now. What we need to do in creating a movement and demanding a different economy is absolutely vital. It's up to us. The impossible is possible, and let's do it. Thank you.